Welcome back. Interesting times 3 weeks in. The vice president is mad at the national security advisor. The secretary of state is miffed after coming out on the losing end of a White House power play. And accounts of the inner workings of the Trump West Wing often sound like a mix of House of Cards and Game of Thrones. For the record, though, the House Bannon and House Priebus say talk of a staff war is a media fantasy. Listen to this from New York Magazine. Steve Bannon says, I'm quite aggressive, and Reince is a calming influence on, hey, bang, bang. Here's how we ought to think about doing that. Priebus then says, we talk a lot, pretty much all day long, and then we communicate at night. Steve Bannon, a little more banter here until we fall asleep. So quickly on this one, you're laughing at the table. Smart on their part. There's all this stories, all these stories out there about these.
No, you hang up.
There's all these stories out about these two guys walking around the West Wing with, essentially in a knife fight, and they at least do an interview to say all is fine.
Which one is country and which one is a little bit rock and roll? Nothing says.
I can answer that question. Priebus Bannon.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Nothing says unity more than Nothing says unity more than stories saying that there's unity, right? I mean, here's the thing. Does Trump mind all this?
Right.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that he does. As you can see, even with him, he loves it.
He had it during the campaign.
He doesn't
Controlled
mind.
chaos.
And
he fuels it,
He doesn't mind.
He lives off feuds. I mean, look, he's happier to live in the world of feuds and controversy than he is litigating the policy details of the getting of aid immigration bill or the North Korean provocation or what have you. But look, White Houses do this. Is not just Trump, by the way. I can recall vividly, Glenn and I talked last week about this, in the spring of 2009, getting a call from a staffer to then White House Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel, say, hey, I've got a good pitch for you that nobody else is really getting this angle. Rahm is actually getting along really well with Valerie Jarrett. And everybody's talking about this controversy, but the real story is that they're actually hanging out a lot. And on background, I can tell you they had dinner last night together. Okay,
Front page stuff, right?
Right, exactly.
Right. So, but
It was Yahtzee.
we'll watch
Trump,
how this sorts out. Bannon obviously is very aggressive. He's more nationalist. He's trying to seize the moment, do things as fast as possible. Reince is more establishment. Let's work with the Congress. Let's move toward the middle of the Republican Party. The one that is front and center that I think is still sort of crackling with tension, though, is I'm told the vice president was furious. He went out on national television after talking to the national security advisor and said that in these calls that Michael Flynn had with the Russian ambassador in the transition period, so President Obama is still in office, he was assured that the idea of sanctions and the whole debate about whether the United States would leave sanctions in place once Mr. Trump became president was not discussed. Mike Pence went on national television, was unequivocal. So there was no conversation about this. Now it turns out on those intercepts, there is some talk of sanctions.
There is some talk of sanctions, people corroborating that, and Flynn, of course, now saying he can't quite remember these conversations. Mike Pence couldn't have been clearer in his statement. Priebus couldn't have been clearer in that statement either. So you have a situation now where either Michael Flynn told a fib, an untruth, or he can't remember conversations that happened just recently.
This trial goes to a jury of one, though, the President of the United States. If the Vice President goes to the President and say, this is my credibility that this man has undermined,
Wait a second. Shouldn't this go before a committee of 535? We had Jason Chaffetz holding hearings, endless hearings and I'm not questioning the fact that he should have investigated what occurred at Benghazi. But we now have, on the record, really significant dissonances in an account that is important to national security. And as we saw at one of his town halls in Utah, he was chased off the stage.
Do your job. That's the oversight, right? To both Obamacare and
so this is ultimately going to ratchet up pressure on the Congress. I don't know how many more of these you can have before the Congress is actually. Republicans in the Congress are going to face some pressure to actually.
There are investigations underway. The Senate Intelligence Committee and the other investigations on Capitol. My question is, does the president wait? Does he, if those investigations are going to lead to something damning about the National Security Advisor, does he wait or does he try to get out ahead of it?
I mean, I think the thing about Trump is, despite his "you're fired" tagline, he doesn't necessarily like to fire people, right? So we'll have to see. I mean, Flynn has been loyal to him. They've been good friends on the campaign trail. So it's hard to see him doing that. It's almost like the chaos of everything. They don't want more chaos.
And he doesn't like capitulation either. I mean, remember the Corey Lewandowski example? He waited weeks.
But real fast, this is a good test for Mike Pence, perhaps his first real big test. How much does he privately with the president try to sort of impose his will after being put in a really bad spot here?
Before we go to break, a lot of serious stuff here. Before we go to break, one of the people at the table here has become a regular on Saturday Night Live. Let's take a quick peek here.
Oh, gosh.
Glenn Thrush, New York Times, stupid hat. Go! Look, I just wanted to know what the president intends to do now that the appeals court denied your request to stop the travel ban.
You're testing me, big guy. Look, it's simple. If the appeals court won't do what's right, President Trump will see them in court, specifically the People's Court.
That isn't real.
You have the floor, sir.
That isn't real.
Good for the kids, right?
My kids love it, and I have to say, I have never worn the hat in the briefing room.
Never wore that.
But he used to wear the hat all the time.
The hat's in the green room.
Yeah.
We should put that baby up on eBay. All right, everybody sit tight. Our reporters share from their notebooks next, including more on the fight over who is the real power center in the West Wing.
We'll be doing something very rapidly having to do with additional security for our country. You'll be seeing that sometime next week. In addition, we will continue to go through the court process, and ultimately, I have no doubt that we'll win that particular case.
President Trump vowing to take more action after the Ninth Circuit Court's ruling against his travel ban on Thursday. The Trump administration says all options are on the table, including perhaps another executive order. Let's talk about it now with our panel. We have with us Ken Cuccinelli, former Virginia Attorney General, Neera Tanden, President and CEO of the Center for American Progress, CNN political commentator Alice Stewart, and Congressman Andre Carson, Democrat of Indiana. Thanks, one and all, for being here. Congressman Carson, let me start with you. You're one of two Muslims serving in the U.S. Congress. You've accused the president of demagoguery on this issue. Is there any form of tighter vetting that you could support?
It takes 18 to 24 months to vet as it stands right now. I think Mr. Trump has already shown his hand. He's trying to now put lipstick on a pig, pun intended, and this is discriminatory against Muslims.
How is it, if it's 7 countries, that?
Sure.
How is it against Muslims?
Well, here's the thing. None of the countries that were involved in 9/11 were even listed. We're talking Egypt and Saudi Arabia. I'm not suggesting that they should be listed. But this is hurting our partnerships internationally. We rely on these countries for intelligence. We rely on these countries for the investments that have been made by those folks who come to this country, start businesses, and they're hiring Americans and putting Americans back to work.
Jake, in terms of this being a Muslim ban, look, if this was a Muslim ban specifically targeted at Muslims, they would have gone after every 51 Muslim majority country. However, they're only focused on 7 that were identified under the Obama administration. And that is critical to remember. And with regard to 9/11, a Senate committee came out last year and said that since 9/11, 60 people from these 7 countries have committed acts of terrorism in the United States, not to mention ones they've carried out in Europe. So that is a serious concern.
In the U.S. and Europe, you mean?
Yes, absolutely.
Look, America's not Europe. This is a precursor to ultimately discriminate against Muslims worldwide. He's using the language of religion to enforce his policies, and it simply will not work, as evidenced by the protests we've seen.
Look, I think the issue here is the court adjudicated this, and they said you can take into account the president's words in the campaign to look at what happened here. He called it a Muslim ban. He called it a Muslim ban multiple times. It's not my words, it's his words. And then the court looked at this. So we had Republican and Democratic judges who were nominated by Republicans and Democrats so far unanimously say that this is beyond his purview. And, you know, actually, no one's arguing, at least I'm not arguing, that there can be additional vetting. But the reality of this is it was sloppily put together, and that they are actually, in a way, I think, to get to Muslim ban, and that's why the court found as it did.
Okay.
Yeah, this is radically overbroad of an injunction.
By the Ninth Circuit.
Oh, it's outrageous. It gives constitutional rights to, just to pick one of the countries, to Somalians who have never been to this country, who have never had a visa. 99.99% of the people covered by this executive order have no constitutional rights, have no claims to anything, and yet this court, beyond even what the Washington Attorney General asked for, gave an injunction against all of that. It is outrageous.
So do you think, if you were advising President Trump, would you say, take this to the Supreme Court, you can win?
No, as I've said on this network earlier this week, rewrite this order. You've now got the set of complaints from the court, basically. Write a separate order for each category identified. And the 99.99% of people I just talked about will never, ever have that order heard in court, because there's no one to sue on it. And then we can debate, the rest of it, the lawful permanent residents, people with visas who's never been, break it down however you like, and many of them have different levels of due process rights, and then write each order for each category.
I think what you're seeing in this whole episode here is that we have a president who didn't go through the normal processes. They didn't really consult with the Justice Department. They didn't really consult with DHS, slapped together essentially an executive order to do his campaign promise. And it is being challenged in the courts, and he's actually losing because he's done such a poor job. And I think you realize, I think the challenge here, I mean, you've just said it. He should rewrite it. He could have written it better from the beginning.
Isn't it amazing that what we're fighting over is how fast a politician is keeping their promises?
No, he's not, though. He's not keeping his promise.
We can all agree that this rollout was shoddily done. That's understandable across the board. But look, the fact that the three-judge panel referenced comments Donald Trump made on the campaign trail and didn't at all reference the actual statute that is the foundation of this executive order, 1182, which gives the president the authority to suspend entry of aliens into this country that he deems detrimental to this country. That speaks volumes. That speaks volumes that this is a political ruling by the court. And I think I agree with Ken. We need to rewrite it in a more strict order. But I think with regard to the appeal to the Supreme Court, we need to slow roll the appeal and fast track the nomination of Gorsuch.
So I just want to show this tweet by Donald Trump on February 5th. Just cannot believe a judge would put our country in such peril. If something happens, blame him and court system, people pouring in. Bad! Exclamation point. Harvard Law professor Lawrence Tribe called this not just preemptive scapegoating, but an attack on the role and rule of law. Congressman?
I agree. I mean, I think that Mr. Trump, his impulsivity concerns me. I've said it over and over again. The fact that he's publicly battling with judges via Twitter, it says that he, one, is unfit to be commander-in-chief, and secondly, I think it speaks to his deeper need for validation. He hasn't demonstrated the same kind of policy depth as a President Obama or President Clinton. He hasn't demonstrated the kind of discipline necessary to be commander-in-chief. And who is he listening to? Obviously no one but himself.
Congressman, did you criticize President Obama when he, in person, bullied the Supreme Court over Citizens United, or when, in May of 2012, when he attempted, successfully I might add, to intimidate the Supreme Court over Obamacare? I don't remember this sort of hand-wringing and gnashing of teeth.
President Obama was the anti-bully.
No, it isn't.
Donald Trump is a classical bully. He's a textbook bully.
Okay,
the
just
President
to be clear,
Obama did it in person.
No.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Can I just say, this is a huge difference. There is a difference between saying, you know what, I disagree with the rulings of a court, and to talk about the ruling itself. Not to, what Donald Trump did was say these judges, the judges, so-called judges, he's attacked the judiciary's independence writ large. If Barack Obama had gone to the well of the Congress and said, these judges have no right to make a decision about Citizens United, or they're imperiling us at writ large, that would be very different than saying, you know, I disagree with the ruling you had. Every politician has a right to say the merits of a decision. What's a problem with Donald Trump, and what should worry constitutionalists who for years have been lecturing liberals about separation of powers, is the fact that this president is attacking a separate branch of government as if it doesn't have any say.
Ken,
and
I'll come to you first next.
Over the years,
we're going to take a very quick break.
北朝鮮のミサイル発射は断じて容認できません。
North Korea's most recent missile launch is absolutely intolerable.
北朝鮮は国連決議を完全に遵守すべきです。
North Korea must fully comply with the relevant UN Security Council resolutions.
先ほどトランプ大統領との首脳会談の中において、米国は常に 100% 日本と共にあるということを明言されました。そしてその意思を示すために今私の隣に立っておられます。
During the summit meeting that I had with President Trump, he assured me that the United States will always with Japan 100%. And to demonstrate his determination as well as commitment, he is now here with me at this joint press conference.
私とトランプ大統領は日米同盟をさらに緊密化し、そして強化していくことで完全に一致をいたしました。
President Trump and I myself completely share the view that we are going to promote further collaboration between the two nations, and also we are going to further reinforce our alliance.
私からは以上です。
That is from myself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. I just want everybody to understand and fully know that the United States of America stands behind Japan, its great ally, 100%. Thank you.
Welcome back. 3 weeks into the Trump presidency, one lesson we do know: he's not going to give up his Twitter account. The president's very active, usually in the morning. How many tweets? Let's take a look at this. We have to make graphics in television. 47 tweets. We made this just before the show. He's up to 49 now. The president is up and tweeting from Florida this morning. 49 tweets from @RealDonaldTrump in just the past week. 9 of them before 8 a.m. He likes to get up in the morning, he watches television, he reads the paper, and he reacts on Twitter. They come in different shapes and sizes. This one, an attack on Nordstrom after it canceled Ivanka Trump's clothing line. Some, these are familiar. In this case, the New York Times, he likes to take after the news media. And Republican senators. He even takes after Republican senators. This, a trademark Trump, a relatively new thing, a 3-parter attacking John McCain, who criticized a raid in Yemen. Why does the president do this? This is how he likes to communicate. Had a conversation the other day with the former Treasury Secretary, Secretary of State, and Ronald Reagan Chief of Staff in the White House, Jim Baker, who says back in the day, can't see Ronald Reagan on Twitter, but he says probably this president shouldn't do it, but you try to change his mind.
Back in our day, we had the issue of the day. It'd be pretty hard today to have the issue of the day if you don't know what the president's going to put on Twitter at 2 a.m. in the morning. You'd have to wait till then to find out what the issue of the day is. But look, it's been very successful for him. So who's to say? I mean, it worked. Nobody thought it would work. It worked. Maybe it'll work now, but I do think it makes it more difficult to have a well-oiled, well-coordinated approach where the administration can speak with one voice.
It was a very polite elder statesman trying to say, look, I know it works for you, sir, but I don't think this is a good way to govern. But in a polite way, Secretary Baker saying this. But even him, I had a conversation with him on camera, and then we were just shooting the breeze before and after the interview. He's fascinated by this because it's one of the things about this president that you look at it and you say, no way, can't do it that way. And yet, to his point, he says it's worked for him, so you try to tell him no.
Yeah, you know, latest tweet this morning about Mark Cuban. Maybe that's the issue of the day that the White House wants to focus on. Hard to believe it is. And that was Baker's point, right? I mean, how do you drive a message out of this White House when you don't know what the president is going to say? He's tweeted a couple of times already this morning. Let's remember, this is right after North Korea and this pretty important international crisis going on.
But this is what he likes.
This is what he likes. And there's no way
you learn in the morning what's on his mind or what he's reacting to, whether he's watching on television or reading the morning headlines. He takes after you guys quite a bit for doing your job. But what are we learning from it? A, he's not going to give it up, but is there anything else more strategic behind it?
That's the important thing. I mean, that to me is the real story of the first month of this presidency as far as the process goes. He's not going to give up the Twitter feed. And I just have to think that there are folks in the White House who are really unhappy about that.
Well, they tried it in the campaign. They tried it in the transition.
And it worked for a little bit in the campaign. But the fact that he's still doing this as the president of the United States, and the fact that nobody's really challenging him about it, to me, is astonishing.
And it's not all sunshine and roses in Mark Cuban's here. He's hurt himself with the tweeting about the ban. The White House is trying to get away from calling the travel ban a ban, and exactly, and it's used in court. So this is actually, he's not to be the Debbie Downer here.
If his family and his staff won't challenge him about giving it up, nobody else is going to. I was on the Hill this week and talking to Republicans there, and they're fine with him doing it. They don't like it, and you can sort of tell with their grimaces, oh, what did he say now? But they've accommodated him. This is remarkable. Bob Corker, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, very important job. He told me that he now gets a printout every morning of whatever the president tweeted overnight.
Wow.
as one.
Well, you have to.
As one friend
they're going
joked
to get
me-
asked about it, right?
I mean, as one friend joked to me, back in the day, a senator on the Foreign Relations Committee would get printouts from the overnight cables from Tokyo or Bonn or what was coming in. Now you're getting the printouts of what the president is tweeting about. Right. So they're accommodating him. They're not sort of confronting him about his behavior. And if they're willing to do it,
but it is part of his style. He uses Twitter to counterpunch. He always says, "I don't throw the first punch." Sometimes he might, but most often he is counterpunching, reacting to something he doesn't like. But in public, too, there were stories this week that his own Supreme Court nominee said in meetings with senators he found it disheartening that he was attacking the so-called judges on the federal court. President Trump reacted to that. He didn't say, good for Judge Gorsuch. He said the media was making it up.
You misrepresented his comments totally.
I asked you what your thoughts were, sir.
His comments were misrepresented. And what you should do is ask Senator Blumenthal about his Vietnam record that didn't exist after years of saying it did. So ask Senator Blumenthal about his Vietnam record. He misrepresented that just like he misrepresented Judge Gorsuch.
I'm old enough to remember reporters asking Donald Trump about his Vietnam record, which he did he have heel spurs? I believe was the issue. But the one thing I want to say, look, his approval rating is historically abysmal, so you can't get away from that. But to Jackie's earlier point, the Gorsuch, with the exception of some of this back chatter, and Gorsuch basically had to do that, in order to.
But why does Trump have to say the media is lying about it?
Clarify,
because that's what
Trump is wrong here, right?
Well, of course he's wrong. But I mean, we have look at the immigration ban policy. Look how it's polling. It has not lost any altitude. It's around 52, between 48 and 52%. It is a relatively popular policy. The Gorsuch legacy, as you said quite rightly, which is far and away the longest lasting legacy item that he's done in his first couple of weeks, went fairly well, and this guy is going to have a very easy time. So in terms of the actual deliverables, it's funny, I had a Republican Senate staffer say to me the other day that executive orders are essentially press releases on steroids, right? I don't want, that's overstating it a little bit, and the legislative battles are still to come. But so far, in terms of the more concrete and longer-lasting decisions that he's made, they haven't been that terrible.
Yeah. And he's still at 90% approval among Republicans.
Holding that base is critical if you're underwater with the others. All right, everybody sit tight. Next, is House Priebus under attack by House Bannon? The palace intrigue around Team Trump and its early turf wars.
I want to start straight with General Flynn. If General Flynn was lying those times when he said that sanctions did not come up, that he did speak to the Russian ambassador about sanctions before taking office, should the president fire him?
Well, this is a very troubling development, and it speaks to the broader issue of Russia's involvement in our elections. It speaks to the issue of President Trump being buddy-buddy with a thug and a murderer who is the head of Russia. And now we're learning that may have been discussions between Flynn and the Russians about sanctions before this administration took power. So this is very, very troubling, and I think the president is going to have to tell us what he's going to do about it.
So far he hasn't said much, Senator. I don't know if you've heard. Here's what he has said. He was asked about this report about Flynn on his flight to Mar-a-Lago late today, right? He just landed about an hour or so ago, and here's how he responded.
I don't know about it. I haven't seen it. What report is that?
I haven't seen it. Reporting that he talked to the ambassador to Russia before you were inaugurated about sanctions, maybe trying to...
I haven't seen that. I'll look at that.
He says he knows nothing about it, hasn't seen any of these reports. Is that a problem?
Well, I don't know. Maybe he was watching CNN fake news. What do you think?
You don't buy it.
That was a joke.
I know it was a joke. I'm saying you don't buy what he said, obviously. We are back. Senator Sanders is back with me, and I want to apologize to our viewers, obviously, for that technical issue. And Senator, you had just been joking about, CNN fake news, but obviously the reports about General Flynn...
Well, here is the point. Here is the point, Darren, that it's not a joke. And I can tell you that here in Vermont and all over this country, there is a real concern about what's happening in this country over the last month. When you have a president who attacks people in the media who make critical remarks of him, which is what their job is, as providing fake news, when you have a president who attacks a judge who rules against him as a so-called judge, indicting the entire judiciary, clearly we have a president who does not understand what our Constitution is about, what democracy is about. And I think there is a fear in this country of this nation under Trump moving into a more authoritarian mode. Second of all, what I hear in Vermont and around this country is people see this president as a total hypocrite. Somebody who campaigned before the American people saying, I'm a different type of Republican. I'm not going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And then he appoints people to those important positions whose whole life work has been about cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. He says, I'm going to take on Wall Street. And then he appoints the head of Goldman Sachs, one of the largest financial institutions in the country, as his right-hand guy, and surround himself with billionaires. So I think there is growing consternation in this country, and what you are seeing is people beginning to stand up and fight back. You're seeing at Republican town meetings in Utah, elsewhere, hundreds and hundreds of people coming out. And I do want to tell you that on February 25th, 2 weeks from tomorrow, there will be rallies all over this country where Democrats, Republicans, independents are going to go out to Republican offices, congressional offices, and say, you know what? You're not going to throw 20 million people off of health insurance, and you're not going to do away with pre-existing conditions. So I think you're seeing the American people standing up to Trump and fighting back.
There's a lot of things I want to ask you about, but because you bring up those town halls, I want to ask you that now. There's been a lot of anger and protests at these Republican town halls, right? This is all about Obamacare, as you point out. You're talking about another day of action. You had one back in January that you were the leader of. Do you think these protests are going to have any impact, though, on Republicans who will, of course, control this, repeal and replace?
Do I think? I think it has already had a huge impact. You remember, it was just a month or two ago, Republicans said, we're going to repeal the Affordable Care Act. We're going to throw millions off of health insurance. We're going to raise prescription drug costs for seniors. We're going to do away with pre-existing conditions. We're going to do all of that. Repeal, repeal, repeal. Guess what? You're not hearing that so much anymore. And I think when hundreds of thousands of people come out and actually confront Republicans and say, look, you don't like the Affordable Care Act? Fine, we know it has problems. What are your ideas to improve it? How are you going to drive down deductibles? How are you going to provide health insurance for the 28 million people who don't have it? Are you going to make sure that people who have pre-existing conditions still are going to be able to get insurance at a rate that they can afford? Are you going to throw young people off their parents' insurance? Are you going to raise prescription drug costs by $2,000 for senior citizens? Those are the questions Republicans are going to hear. And you know what? I don't think you're going to see them going forward with the repeal of the ACA.
So what do you think they're going to do? I mean, they're not going to let it stay as it is.
No, they're not. But I think they're going to have to address the fact that we need to make it better, not just throw it out. People are saying you're crazy. You just can't throw out something without replacing it with something that is good or better. But I think that is the message that the Republicans are getting, and they are hearing it very clearly.
It's interesting that you have all of this action around Obamacare right now and a lot of protests about that, but also a lot of questions about where the Democratic Party is going. Obviously, you're an independent, but this is an issue that is near and dear to Democrats' hearts. We are hearing now, sources just tonight telling us, and I don't think you've heard this, that during a meeting with senators at the White House, President Trump said that Elizabeth Warren is now the face of the Democratic Party, but that's not how he said it. The way he said it is, Pocahontas is now the face of your party. What's your reaction to that?
Well, again, I mean, it's, what can you say? I keep saying it's unbelievable. I mean, he's using incredibly insulting words. Elizabeth Warren, to my view, is one of the outstanding members of the United States Senate. I understand why Trump may not like her, because she has stood up to Wall Street and stood up to the billionaire class. So I think that, in fact, in my view, we need basic transformation of the Democratic Party to make it a party of working people, to make it a party that is very clear. We are going to stand up to Wall Street. We're going to stand up to the drug companies and the insurance companies. And we are going to bring about the kinds of changes that this country needs to protect the middle class and working families.
Why do you think, though, that he always attacks her, right? He's not attacking you. Why is he attacking her? Is it because she's a woman, or why? Why?
You know what, Aaron, I really, trying to understand the way this president functions is something that I can't quite figure out myself, and I'm not sure that many people can.
It does bring me, though, to a serious issue, though, of course, which is mental health, right? In recent days, several Democrats have questioned his mental health. Nancy Pelosi said he should get a mental health check. She suggested that. You yourself have used the word delusional to describe him. Look, I know how you feel about him, but do you think that this talk is disrespectful of the office of the president?
You know, that is a fair question. And if you know my personal record, you know I am maybe the most progressive member of the United States Congress. But that doesn't allow me, and I never have, just attack people because their views are different than mine. You got a lot of Republicans out there, conservative, they're decent, honest people. I disagree with them. I use the term delusional in Trump with regard to Trump when he said there were 3 to 5 million illegals who voted in the last election. Aaron, that is delusional. Nobody in the world believes that is the case. There is zero evidence to back it up. But he makes that statement. So I think the word delusional is correct. I have used the word pathological liar to describe Donald Trump. Those are very harsh terms. I don't feel good about it. I disagreed with George Bush all the time. Never called him a pathological liar because he was not, just a conservative president. But this guy lies all of the time. So we are in kind of a new era. And I know the media is figuring out how it could deal with it. Democrats are figuring out how we could deal with it. And by the way, you got some Republicans who are not all that enthusiastic about the way that this president is behaving. But bottom line here is I think the American people, working people, middle-class people, are understanding that this guy is not delivering what he promised. How can you go around saying you will not cut Social Security and then you appoint to be head of HHS a guy whose whole life's work has been about cutting Medicare, cutting Social Security? The hypocrisy is unbelievable.
Right. Although he hasn't done it yet, and he has, I mean, one could argue he's keeping absolutely all of his campaign promises, right, Senator, including the travel ban, which I want to get your new view on the breaking news tonight, because he's now saying he may issue a new executive order. He says this is about security. He doesn't have the time to fight through the courts, possibly, with the one that was, of course, the issue with the Ninth Circuit Court last night. We asked him tonight on the plane to Mar-a-Lago what would be in the new executive order, and here's exactly how he answered that question.
We're going to have very, very strong vetting. I call it extreme vetting, and we're going to have very strong security in our country. We are going to have people come into our country that want to be here for good reasons.
Is there an executive order on this issue, Senator, that you could get behind? Because we all know there are major security risks. There are people outside the United States who do want to come here to do Americans harm. Is there an executive order on this front that he could rework that you could support?
Look, Aaron, what the president just said is what everybody agrees with. Who wants to create a situation where people are going to come into this country to do us harm? There already is very, very strong vetting. If the president has an idea how you make that vetting even stronger and may keep us safer, that's fine. Who disagrees with that? But this is what I will tell you, and it's not just me. These are national security experts who say that Trump's words and his deeds are making us less safe, because he is feeding ammunition to the jihadists, to the people who hate America. And he's going out and all over the world. You know, the jihadists are telling young people, see that? They really do hate us. That's what we've been telling you all along. They are anti-Muslim. Stand up, fight Americans. So I think, and I think many national security experts would agree with me, that we are becoming less safe because of this anti-Muslim rhetoric and actions.
All right, Senator Sanders, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Professor, he's taking your advice. For the last several days on CNN, you have been saying, rewrite it. Explain.
Well, he said there's an imminent threat, and we know he's going to lose the stay application, so it will take months before he gets to the Supreme Court and achieves a partial victory, which I think he will achieve. And so it's only logical for him to either rescind the order and moot the Ninth Circuit opinion, or simply revise the order and institute a new one while taking a slow track up to the Supreme Court. The last thing he wants is a 4-4 affirmance of the Ninth Circuit's striking down of his order. So he's smart to try to rewrite the order now, get rid of the application of the order to green card holders and legitimate visa holders, apply it only to people who have never been in the United States, have no contact with the United States, have no standing to raise this issue. And in that way, he can accomplish both goals, protect the security of the country and not have a constitutional crisis on his hands.
Do you think that he expands or limits that list of 7 nations? Does he put in a Christian nation so as to avoid an argument over the Establishment Clause?
That would be foolish. There is no Christian nation today that fits into that category. What would he do, throw in Armenia or try to throw in Israel as a Jewish nation? It wouldn't work. In fact, he campaigned on the issue of combating Islamic terrorism, something that the Obama administration refused to mention. And he has the right to say that we're going to focus on those nations that export Islamic terrorism. Of course, there are going to be Muslim nations. And he also has the right to say we're going to give special preference to religious minorities who are the victims of Islamic oppression. They are Christians, they are Baha'is, they are Kurds, they fall into a number of categories. And it's okay to mention religious groups if there's a secular purpose, and the secular purpose is to rescue them from prosecution. So I think he gets the better of the constitutional argument if he can narrow the executive order and distinguish between people who are American persons, green card holders, others, and those who are really strangers to the country and have no standing and no right to come into the country.
Am I right in saying that he kind of backed himself into a corner? Because insofar as the order is predicated on an imminent threat, he can't then sit back and allow the litigation to play itself out for a time period that, frankly, would be longer than the ban he sought to impose.
And that was my point exactly. As soon as the Ninth Circuit ruled, I said he had a conundrum. He had backed himself into the corner by saying that this was imminent, so I think he has no choice but to do this. But look, he's listening. And he's understanding now for the first time that we do operate within a system of checks and balances. Not only do the courts check, but now states have the ability to bring lawsuits and check the national government. This drama is going to continue for months in the future because we have figured out a way of making sure that the president can't just operate without our system of checks and balances. So he's going to have to get used to living within our system of separation of powers, where the judiciary is as important in our system of governance as the presidency is.
Well, he's listening. He's listening to Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, and he could do a hell of a lot less. Thank you, Professor. Appreciate your being here.
I'm joined now by the Republican governor of New Jersey and former advisor to President Trump, Governor Chris Christie. Governor, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here, Jay. Good morning.
So I want to start by asking you about the ICE raids, because it seems untrue that all of those being deported are dangerous individuals. Let's posit that deporting dangerous people who are here in this country illegally is a good thing. But one of those deported was Guadalupe Garcia de Rios. In 2008, she illegally used someone else's Social Security number for employment at a water park, for which she was later charged with a felony. The mayor of Phoenix, Greg Stanton, put out a statement after she was removed from the U.S. saying, quote, ICE is spending its energy deporting a woman with 2 American children who has lived here for more than 2 decades and poses a threat to nobody, unquote. What's your message to the undocumented immigrants in New Jersey, your home state, who are not drug dealers, who are not gang members, who have not committed any sort of violent crime? Should they be worried about being deported?
Well, Jake, this is the problem with the whole failure of the federal government over the course of the last 12 to 16 years in not dealing with trying to reform the immigration system and bring some sense of order to this. When that's the case, then the laws that are in effect right now have to be enforced. And that's what's happening right now. Now, you know, I know that the president's focus and his desire is to make sure that first they get violent criminals out of the United States, people who have been charged with violent acts. That's what I think what ICE is attempting to do. But as I can tell you, Jake, from having run a government for 7 years and been involved for many years as a U.S. attorney, things always don't go perfectly. And so you're going to have some people who also, by the way, have violated the law, but don't fit that one category. But that will be the overwhelming minority in all this. And what people should focus on is what the president is trying to do, which is to keep a campaign promise on making sure that violent criminals who are here illegally are taken out of the country in order to make America's streets safer.
But as you know, Governor, this is a big concern in the Garden State of New Jersey. Princeton officials are distributing information letting undocumented immigrants know how to avoid deportation. New Brunswick, there's a debate about whether New Brunswick becomes a sanctuary city. What is your message to the citizens of your state about undocumented immigrants who, like the woman I just discussed, are not violent criminals, who have children who are American and are now in fear?
Well, Jake, first off, it should be surprising to no one that institutions like Princeton University, where, by the way, I'm a member of the board as governor of New Jersey, are going to take a very progressive, liberal position towards this, and we'll try to grandstand this during a time of political debate. Listen, our position has been the same all along. The federal government should be enforcing federal law. And they have to make clear that federal law will be enforced. If that's the president's desire, then he should go ahead and make sure that that's done. On the state level, we're doing the things that we've always done in New Jersey to try to keep our streets safe. That's why our prison population is at an all-time low, and crime declined again in New Jersey this year. So we're doing what we need to do at the state level to keep people safe, and the federal government should be enforcing federal law, and if they don't like the federal law, then they should go to Congress and get it changed.
Let's turn to Russia. CNN has now matched that bombshell Washington Post report that National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, according to several government officials, privately discussed U.S. sanctions against Russia with that country's ambassador right around the time that President Obama was imposing new sanctions and before President Trump took office. I guess there are two issues here. One is the White House not telling the truth about this conversation and the conversation itself. Let's take them one by one. If General Flynn did tell the Russian ambassador something along the lines of, don't worry about these sanctions President Obama is imposing, we're going to revisit them later, would that trouble you?
Well, listen, I don't think that you can have any more than one president at a time. And, you know, General Flynn has said up to this point that he had not said anything like that to the Russian ambassador. I think now he's saying that he doesn't remember whether he did or not. So that's a conversation he's going to need to have with the president and the vice president to clear that up so that the White House can make sure that they're completely accurate about what went on. But I've always been a person who believed that you have one president at a time, and that's the way things should be done.
Well, and you touched on this in your answer, because of General Flynn's original adamant denial, although as you point out, he has now walked it back saying he can't recall, Vice President Pence, Sean Spicer have now said things to the public that are apparently not true. Take a listen to Vice President Pence on January 15th.
What I can confirm, having spoken to him about it, is that those conversations that happened to occur around the time that the United States took action to expel diplomats had nothing whatsoever to do with those sanctions.
If General Flynn lied to the vice president, what should the consequences be?
Well, that would be up to the vice president and the president. And so I'm sure that there'll be conversations between the vice president, the president, and General Flynn to make sure that everybody gets the accurate story on this matter, and that it's cleared up. And I think that's the obligation of General Flynn as National Security Advisor, to have those type of candid conversations with the president and the vice president, and then they'll act as they see fit given all the circumstances.
Let's turn to the fact that there are a lot of Republicans who are concerned about the rollout of President Trump's travel ban. You yourself said last week that President Trump was ill-served by his staff on the issue. I know that you're focused on finishing your job as governor of New Jersey, and you still have a year left. But after your term is over, if President Trump were to come to you and say, Chris, I need you to help run things, would you be willing to serve in the Trump administration?
Jake, you know we're not going to get into hypotheticals like that. My view is I've got a year to go, as you aptly put in your question, a little short of a year as governor of New Jersey. And then after that, as I've told everybody, my intention is to go to the private sector and work to help support my family in a different way than I've been able to over the last 16 years as U.S. attorney and as governor. But as always, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, has been my friend and Mary Pat's friend for the last 15 years. And whenever he calls or I call him and we have conversations, I'm always willing, if he asks, to give my opinion on things. But I have absolutely no intention nor any understanding that I'll be asked to be in the administration in the years to come. My view is I've got a job to do as governor, and then my intention is to go off to the private sector and to help support my family.
There are reports that President Trump, because his wife and his son are often in New York, that he makes a lot of late-night calls to friends and confidants. Are you among them? Have you talked to the president recently?
You know what, Jake? I've always said this before he was elected president, and it's even more important since he's been elected president. The conversations between me and the President of the United States, to the extent they occur, will always remain between me and the President of the United States.
Do you still talk to him, just as a vague concept? Do you still talk to him?
I don't know what vague concept means, Jake. Like I said, to the extent that those conversations occur, they'll remain between me and the President. What I will say to you is that Mary Pat and I still consider him to be a very good friend of ours. We have for the last 15 years, both he and the First Lady. And that friendship, I'm confident, will continue during the time that he's president and when he leaves the presidency.
Let's turn to health care. You took a lot of heat in national conservative circles when, as governor, you expanded Medicaid in New Jersey as part of Obamacare. Recently, you said that the naysayers have been proven wrong, and you touted the fact that an additional 500,000 people in New Jersey now have health insurance who didn't have it before. Have you asked President Trump to keep the Medicaid expansion in place even as the Congress and he vow to repeal and replace Obamacare?
Listen, I think repealing and replacing Obamacare was something that I was for when I was a candidate for President of the United States, and one that I'm still for now. And how that will happen is going to be the part of what I hope will be a really vigorous, open conversation between the executive branch and the Congress and the nation's governors, since the Medicaid program is 50% funded for the most part by the nation's governors and our state taxes over the course of the next number of months. And I'm really hopeful that we're going to be able to be a participant in that conversation. And I will certainly share with the president and the administration the experiences we've had here in New Jersey on the Medicaid program. For instance, 5 times the number of people are now getting drug abuse treatment in New Jersey through the Medicaid program that got it 3 years ago. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing for America's future and for our children. And so I certainly will share those stories. And then the president and the Congress will make an overall policy determination as to how they want to move forward. But I am convinced the president and the Congress are both committed to repealing and replacing Obamacare, and I support them in doing so. The nuances of that, Jake, is something that I hope the governors get a chance to participate in. And if we do, you can count on the fact that I'll participate in that conversation.
Is it fair to characterize your position, though, as you don't want those 500,000 people who now have insurance who didn't have it before the Medicaid expansion and Obamacare, you don't want them to lose their insurance?
Well, Jake, I want them to continue to be able to have coverage. Now, there can be lots of different ways that can happen through a repeal and replacement of Obamacare. And there are great minds inside the Congress, led by Speaker Ryan, who are going to have ideas on how to do this. There'll be great minds in the administration, like Secretary Price, who has been a longtime leader on this, who will have ideas to do it. And what the president will do is what he's always done. President Trump is a deal maker. He knows how to bring people together and to close deals. That's his greatest strength as a leader. And I think he will bring these folks together along with the nation's governor, since we are stakeholders in this, and make sure that we get something that will take care of the people of the United States. He has always said he does not want a system where people are without health care. He said that from the beginning of his time as a candidate. I take him at his word, and we're going to work together to make sure that happens. Whether it's through Medicaid or another vehicle is something that we'll have to see as time goes forward and the ideas get fully fleshed out.
New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Always great to be with you, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Progressives bind together to fight President Trump. Minnesota Senator Al Franken is emerging as a real liberal hero. And after years of playing it straight in the Senate, the former Saturday Night Live star is finally deploying his secret weapon, humor. Here he is on what his Republican colleagues are telling him about President Trump.
Some will say that he's not right mentally. And then some are harsher.
That was Senator Franken on Real Time with Bill Maher, and he's here right now. Not Bill Maher, but Senator Franken. Thanks for joining us.
I'm with Jake Tapper.
So I know that was comedy, but is it true that Republican colleagues of yours express concern about President Trump's mental health?
A few.
Really?
Yeah. It's not the majority of them. It's a few.
In what way?
In the way that we all have this suspicion that, that he lies a lot. He says things that aren't true. That's the same as lying, I guess. 3 to 5 million people voted illegally. There was a new one about people going in from Massachusetts to New
Thousands
Hampshire.
and thousands in a bus, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, that is not the norm for a president of the United States, or actually for a human being.
So let's turn to Michael Flynn. The Washington Post and CNN are reporting that he, according to many government officials, spoke to the Russian ambassador about the Obama sanctions against Russia before President Trump took office, suggesting, hold on there, we'll revisit them after we take office. House Minority Leader Pelosi tweeted last night, General Flynn should be suspended and have his intelligence clearance revoked. Do you agree? What do you think the consequences should be?
Well, you know, I mean, either he was lying about not having discussed that, or he forgot.
You don't believe your smile says you don't believe that he forgot.
I don't think you want a guy who would forget that. Your national security advisor would forget that he was talking about lifting the sanctions with a Russian ambassador. I don't think you want a guy in either of those scenarios to be in that position.
But it's not a Senate confirmable position, so what can you do and what do you think should happen?
Look, there's going to have to be investigations, and an independent investigation into the Trump campaign and the Trump administration's relationship to Russia. Russia interfered in this campaign. We know that, although Trump denied it for a long time. We have not seen the president's income tax. His son said a few years ago that an inordinate amount of money was coming in from Russia, investing in them. The president said that he couldn't release his income tax because he was under audit. You can release your income tax when you're under audit, and also he hasn't provided any proof that he was under audit. There is a lot here that we need to look at, and we need to have an independent investigation on it.
When you say independent, what do you mean? Independent counsel? Select committee?
I think an independent counsel would be terrific, but I know that Lindsey Graham and Sheldon Whitehouse in Judiciary are doing hearings and an investigation. I trust those guys. There's something going on in intelligence, but that is so opaque. We need something transparent, and we need an investigation, because
Real power center in the West Wing.